Lesson 2.5, solving equations involving absolute value. Okay, in this video, you will learn to evaluate absolute value expressions and solve absolute value equations. So, first thing we need to think about before we get into this is what exactly is absolute value. So, absolute value is symbolized by bars around just straight bars around something. And it means it's the distance from zero, okay? Or it's always going to be positive. So if I'm looking at this, if I put in x equals 5, 5 is 5 away from 0. And negative 5 is also 5 spots away from 0. So for this, x can either be 5 or negative 5. Either one you put in will give you 5. Okay, so if we're solving an equation with an absolute value, or just expression, we're putting in 5. Okay, so if I put in here 5 minus 7, right, because I said a is 5, so I'm putting that in for a. So 5 minus 7 plus 15. 5 minus 7 is negative 2 plus 15. So negative 2, absolute value, so negative 2 is 2 spaces away from 0. So it becomes 2 plus 15, which is 17. Okay, so when you're solving equations involving absolute value, there are two cases to consider. The expression inside the absolute value symbol is positive or 0, or case 2, the expression inside the absolute value symbol is negative. So for any real numbers a and b, if absolute value of a equals b and b is greater than or equal to 0, then a equals b or a equals negative b. So for example, if I have the absolute value of d equals 10, d is either 10 or negative 10. So that's like what I did before with x and negative 5. Okay, so if we want to solve this, either this thing in here is positive 7, or it could be negative 7, because absolute value of negative 7 is also 7. So we can have x minus 1 equals negative 7. So whenever you have absolute value, whenever you see those things, you should be thinking two answers or two cases, okay? So case 1 is the positive of this, and case 2 is the negative. So then we just go through and solve these like we would solve normal equations. So 2x equals 8. So then x is going to be 4 when you divide both sides by 2. So same thing over here, adding 1 to both sides, and you get 2x equals negative 6. We divide by 2, and x equals negative 3. So we can either get x equals 4 or x equals negative 3. Okay, and it just says to graph the solution set. So if I were to graph these on a line, if this is negative 3, it could be that, or it could be 4 here. And the 0 would be somewhere in there. Okay. Okay, this one. Can negative 5 be a distance? Can you ever be a distance of negative? No, distance is always positive. So you can't ever take the absolute value of anything and get a negative number. Absolute value is always positive. So whenever you see this, like an absolute value of something equals something negative, that just means automatically no solution. And you can't graph it because there's nothing to graph. Okay. The average January temperature in northern Canadian city is 1 degrees Fahrenheit. The actual January temperature for that city may be about 5 degrees Fahrenheit warmer or colder. Write and solve an equation to find the maximum and minimum temperatures. Okay. So, okay, so to solve this one, when we have something like this, we do x minus the average equals whatever the range is. Okay, so in this case, they said the average was 1, and the range, it says it can be either 5 warmer or colder. So it's going to be fluctuating by 5 from the center of 1. So to do this, I have to, whenever I see I have absolute value, I'm making two equations. So x minus 1 equals 5, and x minus 1 equals negative 5. 1 positive, 1 negative. And then solving both of these, I get x equals 6 and x equals negative 4. So for this, if 5 is our center, or if 1 is our center, 5 degrees warmer would be 6, and 5 degrees colder would be negative 4. So same thing with this one. It's very similar. If we want to write an equation involving absolute value for the graph, we're going to do x minus the average, or in this case, average the center. And then that's going to be equal to the range. Okay, so if we're looking at this between negative 4 and 6, the center of that is going to be right here, and that is 1. So we're going to have x minus 1, and that's going to be that part. And we want to know how far each of these numbers are from 1. So this is going from 1 to 6, that goes a range of 5. And from negative 4 to 1, it's also going a range of 5. So if you were to solve that, this would be your equation to do that. Okay? And that is the end of this section. So I will scroll through the practice problems for if you want to do some extra practice and write down any questions you might have, and we'll go over them in the next class.